Hello everybody, Martin Radner here from Radner Law Group, bringing you trial analysis. Today we're going to be continuing to discuss the Charlie Adelson murder trial, and specifically we're going to be discussing the Jeffrey Lacasse testimony. So Jeffrey Lacasse is Wendy's new boyfriend after the divorce. He gave testimony already in the other trials which led to convictions, and now he's testifying again in Charlie's case. Very interesting stuff. We're going to jump into that in just 1 minute. Please, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, like the video so we can continue growing and bringing more people this important trial analysis. So, Jeffrey Lacasse, let's first, the first thing I want to do is let me show you the clip that we're going to be discussing today, and then after we see the clip, then I'll talk to you about the context, what led up to it, and then what the judge's rulings were, what were the basis for the rulings, if there's creating any appealable issues, and we will jump into all of the analysis that has to do with this clip. But first, let's just play this clip.
Questions on the topic you were starting.
Mr. Lacasse, when we broke, we were discussing a statement made to you by Wendy Adelson on July 13th, 2014 at her residence here in Tallahassee. Do you recall which statement?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and what was that statement?
After asking to speak to me confidentially, she told me that last summer that Charles Adelson had looked into all possible options to take care of the Danny Markell problem, including hiring a hitman, and that it would cost about $15,000. I revised the amount. I said potentially that could have been $50,000. I'm unsure of the amount. The rest of the statement, very confident, is true.
So you weren't sure whether she said 15 or 50.
Right.
But she didn't say 15 or 50. She said one or the other.
She said one number that I thought was 15 when I talked to TPD, and later thought that could have been 50.
Okay, I'm with you. And this statement was made in what context? What was her demeanor?
Well, she asked to speak to me confidentially. She was dead serious about it. It was a chilling statement. I had a reaction to it. My stomach flipped. A little scary, a little weird. So it was a very serious statement she's making.
So clearly not a joke.
No, it was not a joke. There are other jokes in that domain. This was completely distinct and discrete from any joke. This was not funny.
Okay, so who is Jeffrey Lacasse? Let's step back a little bit to bring us up to speed to get to that clip. Jeffrey Lacasse is the new boyfriend of Wendy Adelson after the divorce. So she finally finalizes the divorce in 2013. She gets a new boyfriend, Jeffrey Lacasse. At the end of 2013, they're more casual, and then beginning of 2014, then that's when it becomes much more of a serious relationship. They become what I guess you would call exclusive, or they're supposed to be exclusive, boyfriend or girlfriend, and that means they're not seeing other people, not trying to date other people, and they're just building a relationship together, possibly looking towards the future as marriage, maybe that he's going to be taking over the father figure instead of Dan Markell. Okay, so this is going on in the beginning of 2014. Now, March 11th, 2014, that's when Jeffrey meets Charlie for the first time. They meet at a dinner, and Jeffrey is with Wendy, and Charlie is with Kate. And they're talking together at dinner, and during the dinner, Jeffrey notices that Charlie is really just a very loud guy. He loves to talk. He dominates the conversation. He likes to brag and talk about, he's that type of person. He's just very successful. He's very wealthy. He drives a Ferrari, and he just seems like this guy that's just a larger than life type of character. And after the dinner, they eventually go home to Charlie's home. Everybody there goes to Charlie's home, and they sit in the hot tub, and they're talking in the hot tub. And Charlie's continuing with his bragging. And one of the things that he's actually bragging about is very interesting, which this is brought out in testimony that Jeffrey gave in a different one of the other trials, is that he talks about that one of the things that Charlie's bragging about is the fact that he was been with underage, seems like girls, and in different places, and he's kind of bragging about that, which is interesting, number one, because he is in front of his sister. Not many people would brag about this in front of their sister. And also, Wendy was the one who wrote a book about child trafficking. And here you got Charlie kind of bragging about the different things, the inappropriate things that he's done with children underage in the different places that he's traveled. And it's just a very weird situation for Jeffrey. Anyway, so they're sitting in the hot tub, and of course they're talking about exes. They're talking about Wendy's situation with Dan Markell. And one of the things that Charlie brings up, and one of the things that I guess he's bragging about in that hot tub, is that not only does he know people from the professional world. He's a periodontist, he's a dentist, he rubs shoulders with professional people and doctors and things like that. But also he has connections with people that are on the other side of the track, meaning the criminal side of the world also. And he's very close with some Cubans. And that's also what he's kind of talking to Jeffrey about and kind of bragging about, that he also has this connection to the criminal people, that the Cuban or criminal track of people that he's able to make friends with and be able perhaps to carry out certain things that he needs done. And that's what happens on March 11, 2014. So then in June 4th, 2014, Jeffrey again is meeting with Wendy for a coffee. They're meeting for coffee. And at this point, the relationship's already progressing. Now, it seems like it's pretty fast because they just started dating it seriously in the beginning of 2014. This is June 2014. Jeffrey's already met the family. He's met Charlie. And now he's talking to Wendy about bringing Wendy to California to meet his parents. And they had a trip scheduled for July. The trip was supposed to go from July 11th to July 17th. And at this meeting that Wendy has with Jeffrey, Wendy cancels the trip. She tells him she can't go on the trip from July 11th to July 17th. And when asked about this, Jeffrey said he didn't understand the reason. He couldn't understand the reason. And he said that the reason that she gave was because she was nervous that she wouldn't be back on July 18th at 5 p.m. to pick up her children. So she had to pick up her kids at July 18th at 5 p.m. Remember, July 18th was the day of the murder. And so she was not going to make it back. She was nervous she was not going to make it back. They may get delayed and not make it back for July 18th when the trip was really only supposed to go from July 11th to July 17th. So it didn't make much sense to him. Even if your flight gets delayed for a couple hours, you still should be able to make it back at least for sure at the end of the night of July 17th. And even if not at the end of the night, July 17th, at least in the morning of July 18th. And here she doesn't have to pick up the kids till July 18th at 5 p.m. So it didn't make any sense to him why she just all of a sudden canceled the trip that they were supposed to go on to meet his parents from July 11th to July 17th. Now, also something else he noticed is that when they got back after he met with Wendy from coffee, so they went back home, he said that she was an absolute wreck. She was just a wreck at the end of that night on June 4th, 2014. Just a nervous wreck. And she had major stomach problems, and he went out to the store to buy her some Pepto-Bismol. And now, why is that? He couldn't understand why all of a sudden she became a nervous wreck. It had nothing to do with the food from as far as he can see, and it just seemed that she was just very anxious about something, very nervous about something. And the only thing that now that he's saying, looking back 2020, looking back, is that it happens to be that on June 4th, 2014 was the first attempt where the murder on Dan Markel was supposed to happen. As you recall, there's really two attempts. June 4th, 2014 is when they first attempted to murder Dan Markel, and for whatever reason they couldn't carry it out. And then they came back and they did it on July 18th. So June 4th, now it makes a lot of sense why she would be so nervous, so anxiety-ridden that night, especially if she heard that it didn't actually happen, the murder. But again, that seems to be what his suggestion is, even though he doesn't say it straight out. Now, we get into the TV. Now, remember, there's going to be a lot of discussion about the TV in this case. And remember, her TV broke, and that's part of her alibi, why it couldn't have been her that she pulled the triggers, because her TV was in the middle process of getting fixed by the Geek Squad from Best Buy. Right? This is the TV that Charlie bought for her because it was, as a joke, cheaper than hiring a hitman. So this is the TV that Charlie bought for her, and it broke. And that's when the Geek Squad came on July 18th in the morning to fix her television. Now, Jeffrey Lacasse testifies that he actually knew that the TV broke between June 11th and June 18th. So that's a full month before July 18th when the Geek Squad came to fix the TV. What is this whole month break? And again, he doesn't say this, but this is what he's kind of suggesting. That what is with this whole month break? He couldn't figure it out. And in fact, they had a movie night together with the kids, with her kids at her place with her broken TV. And in fact, he got there and she had a different TV. And he was suggesting, why don't we just plug in the DVD to the TV that's not broken? And something else that he noticed is that, and she didn't want to do that. She was like, she didn't want to do it. You had to watch it on this broken television. And he couldn't figure out why. And something else that he mentioned during his testimony is that it seemed to him that the television was actually broken purposely. It looked like somebody just smashed the television. And he said it couldn't have been, according to his understanding, it couldn't have been from the kids. The kids couldn't have broken this TV. They're very young. And the way that the TV was broken, it looked like somebody purposely broke, again, suggesting that this was a setup, that really Wendy was setting up that she would, again, this is what's unsaid, is that it's going to be that she's going to go break this television and then schedule the Geek Squad to come on the day that Dan Markel is supposed to be murdered, July 18th. Anyway, also, there's something that he mentions is that Jeff offers to buy her a new television. He said it wasn't terribly expensive television. It wasn't like a really expensive, fancy television. It was a regular television, and he was happy to offer her to fix it. And again, remember, you have to remember that the relationship is progressing. In fact, he's testified in other cases that she was already telling him that the kids should call him daddy. So like it was very interesting to him how she was understanding this relationship. But again, if in her world this relationship is just progressing so quickly and he can already be called daddy, then why can't he buy her a television to fix the broken television? So he didn't understand why she was refusing for him to buy her a new television. And so that's what happened. Now, there's a big fight between Jeff and Wendy on June 27th and June 28th. Around that time, they had a very big fight. And the fight was surrounding the fact that Jeff was accusing her of seeing other men. And he had this feeling that she was seeing other men, which later was confirmed by the prosecution that she actually had these active dating apps, which she was using during the time that she was supposed to be exclusively Jeff's girlfriend. So Jeff actually, what he testified, he kind of mentioned this offhandedly, that it actually turned out that he was right, that she actually was cheating on him and dating other men or looking to date other men while they're supposed to be exclusive, and while she was stringing him along, saying how my kids are gonna call you daddy. So, a lot of feelings that are going on there. However, they had this big fight happened on June 27th, June 28th, and then they still, after that, he said that the relationship could have been over. And this is one of the questions that were asked, when did your relationship end with Wendy? And same question was asked to Wendy, when did your relationship end with Jeff? And they both said that it could have technically ended June 27th, June 28th after this big fight, but it seemed that it didn't officially end till much later, right around the time of the murder. That's exactly when it seemed to have ended. And but they continued dating, and apparently he must have been very excited about continuing a relationship with her. He must have really been committed and really wanted this relationship, because even after that, he was still continuing the relationship. If she wanted it, he was continuing it. So again, but he did testify also that he kind of felt that he was being strung along. Things didn't make sense, and he kind of felt that he was being strung along since April. So you've got both sides. On the one hand, he kind of felt that something was always off with this relationship, but on the other hand, he's continuing to pursue it and continuing to be there for her and continuing to continue the relationship. So, okay, so this is June 27th, June 28th is the fight, and then they continue. Now, on July 13th, they meet and they have dinner. And then they have a dinner, they go to a movie, and then they return to her house. And that is when that clip happened. That's when that conversation, that alleged conversation between Wendy and Wendy and Jeff occurred about what Charlie told Wendy. And it was absolutely not a joke. It was serious. His stomach flipped. He was he couldn't believe what he was hearing. And it was not in joking at all. Now, as soon as you hear that, it really completely takes the air out of the defense's argument here, right? The defense is arguing that this whole thing was just one big joke. He never meant it. He was never serious about it. Well, here you have Jeffrey saying that there was a very serious conversation that Wendy was telling him that Charlie absolutely was serious about getting a hitman. That kind of just completely takes the air out of the sails of the defense, out of their argument. So, what are you going to do? So the cross on that is what the defense attorney gets up and during cross-examination on Jeff, he says, well, if it was so chilling, why didn't you go to the police? If your stomach flipped and you were just so terrified, why didn't you go to the police right away and say that something that's going on? That was a very good point. Why didn't he? And he gave some excuse, why, maybe he thought it was in the past and didn't think that it was in the future and something like that. But again, something's wrong there. Something doesn't make 100% sense there. Also, he said, why in the world would you want to continue dating her? You see what she does to her exes. You see what she's willing to do to her exes. You see how crazy her brother is. and you're going to just go continue dating her and continue wanting to pursue a relationship with her? That doesn't make any sense either. And that's a good point too. So these are 2 points that are brought up by Cross. But also, just one more thing before we discuss what happened with that, with this, with that testimony, whether that testimony is going to be allowed in, is that something else that he mentioned is that he was actually, something that Jeff mentions, that he was supposed to leave Tallahassee on the day of the murder at 11 o'clock a.m. Now remember, the murder happened earlier in the day, and he was supposed to leave Tallahassee. And in fact, one of their last meetings that he had with Wendy, even though they were basically broken up at that point, Wendy asked him, are you going to be still leaving on Friday? And she was very interested in his plans of leaving on Friday, when he's going to be leaving on Friday. He's not going to leave anytime before that. She was very into finding out about his plans to leave Tallahassee on Friday. Now, it so happens to be that he decided to change his plans, even though initially he was going to go on Friday, but he changed his plans to go Thursday night. And that was his alibi. He ended up having credit card receipts, not alibi, but that was his defense, and that's why he was cleared as a suspect, because he was very clearly out of the area, out of the neighborhood, and because he already left Thursday night. But again, a suggestion that this whole time he was being strung along so that he can be considered a suspect. And in fact, one of the first suspects that Wendy mentioned to the investigators was Jeff Lacasse. So again, something that he does obviously did not appreciate, and something that he's he's not happy about this, and that's kind of what he's turning against Wendy right now. Now, with that clip that we saw in the beginning about this conversation that happened on July 13th with Jeff and Wendy about what Charlie told Wendy, that clip actually was out of the presence of the jury. The jury did not see that. And what was going on, there was something called an offer of proof. And an offer of proof, or a proffer, is when the judge is not 100% sure what he's going to do with certain testimony. There's been objections, and he wants to see how the questions are going to go, and he wants to see what the back and forth, the cross-examination, the direct examination, he wants to see it, and then he'll make a ruling on it. So it's called an offer of proof. Or if the judge already made a ruling that he's not going to allow something in, but for the record, you want to keep it in the record so that it'll be available for appeal. So you'll still want to offer it as an offer of proof, and then at least it'll be in the record that the Court of Appeals can now look at it and see whether it would have been admissible or not, and maybe if the judge made the wrong call. So that's what was going on with that clip. It was actually just a proffer. It was out of the presence of the jury. Now, what happened is the following. That clip, actually, that testimony was allowed in the other trials in this case. That exact testimony about what Charlie told Wendy and what Wendy then told Jeff, and that there was no joking at all and it was all serious, that was allowed in the other trials. So what happened in this case? Well, what happened in this case, the defense obviously was doing the homework. They were watching these other trials or getting the transcripts of these other trials, and they saw that this was going to come out. Now, really, if you think about it, it really should fall within hearsay. It should fall within the hearsay rule, and hearsay is not admissible evidence. Now, this is where it gets fun for the legal scholars. So this is actually a statement of not just hearsay, but it's actually hearsay within hearsay. So let's just take it step by step. What's hearsay? Hearsay is very simply, I'm testifying, I'm sitting on the stand, I'm a witness, and I'm testifying about what somebody else told me. So I'm telling you the reason that I know what I know is because that person told me. That's called hearsay, and it's not admissible. Now, there's another level, it's called double hearsay, or hearsay within hearsay. Hearsay within hearsay is, I know this because somebody else told me that somebody else told him. So it's 2 levels of hearsay. Now, there are exceptions in which hearsay is admissible. Hearsay is generally not admissible to prove the matter asserted in the hearsay. So if somebody tells you, I'm telling you Charlie hired this hitman to kill Dan Markel. And now I testify and say, look, I know that Charlie hired this man to kill Dan Markel because that guy told me. That's hearsay, and you're offering it to prove that Charlie actually did hire the man. That's textbook hearsay, and that's not allowed. But there are certain exceptions in which hearsay is allowed. For example, one of the things that hearsay is allowed for is an excited utterance. An excited utterance is an utterance that you weren't expected to say. You didn't plan on saying it. You were just completely taken aback by a situation, and you just blurted out something. That would be acceptable. That would be admissible. That's not considered hearsay. So that's one example. Exception. There's a whole list of exceptions for when hearsay is admissible? Well, one of the reasons why hearsay can be admissible is for impeachment purposes, and that would be to impeach somebody else. So, for example, in this case, Wendy claims that there was no such conversation between her and Jeff. She and Jeff never had a conversation about what Charlie told her in confidence and how serious he was when he said what he told Wendy about hiring a hitman. She claims no, it was always a joke. Now, if you want to impeach the credibility of Wendy, so then you want to say, well, there is testimony that this conversation actually did happen. And it was a serious conversation. Now, it's not being offered then to prove that Charlie actually did it. What it's being offered to is to prove that Wendy wasn't being truthful. And it's being offered, so that's being offered for impeachment. So what happened in this case is that the defense attorney and the prosecution had a sidebar with the judge regarding this specific issue, whether Jeff is going to be allowed to testify about what Wendy told him that Charlie told her. This double hearsay, this hearsay within hearsay issue. And the defense attorney filed a motion in limine regarding it. He obviously did his homework. He saw the other trials in this case, and he knew that this was going to be a very important issue, and he didn't want it to come into his trial. So therefore, at least he tried to keep this out by saying it's hearsay within hearsay, without any exception. The prosecution's response to that was, of course, I'm not going to offer anything that's hearsay within hearsay without any exception. So that was the ruling. And now they're going in front and they're having the testimony of Jeff come out, and prosecution starts asking Jeff about what Wendy told him, about what Charlie told her. So the defense attorney right away jumps up and says, well, I object because we discussed this, that there was a motion in limine about this, and she's not allowed to talk about that. And the prosecution's response was, I'm not offering it for the truth of the matter asserted, which is the problem of offering a hearsay, but it is admissible to prove for impeachment purposes. And therefore she's saying we're going to impeach Wendy because Wendy claims that this conversation never happened. So that's why she was offering it. And technically, she's probably right under the law that she's allowed to offer it for impeachment purposes. But the defense attorney then argued that since we had a sidebar previously, and because Wendy was on the stand before Jeff took the stand, and I thought that the ruling was that we're not allowed to talk about this, so I didn't even explore it with Wendy. Had I known that really this court's ruling was that she is allowed to bring it up in the form of impeachment, I would have explored it more with Wendy. So now it's an unfair advantage to me. It's not fair that I don't have Wendy under subpoena. I can't subpoena her. She's under the state subpoena, but she's not under my subpoena. And now I can't recall her to rebut what Jeff is saying she allegedly told him about Charlie telling her that this is all very serious and not just a joke. So that was his argument. Therefore, the judge said, well, it seems like the judge's ruling was that although technically the prosecutor's probably right that she is allowed to bring this stuff up for impeachment, but because you're making this new argument, it's not fair, and you understood that it was not allowed not to come in, and that's what you understood, and now it's unfair to you, so now the judge is not allowing this testimony in, even though it came in the other trials. So this could be a real appealable issue if the verdict does not come down in the favor of the prosecution. So that's why I thought that clip was very interesting, and that's why this trial is going to be a little different than the other trials. Again, like we said in the beginning, there's still a very big uphill battle for the defense to actually win this case and for the jury to buy his theory that this was all one big extortion plan from Katie and her old boyfriend. But we will see how this all plays out. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you all for watching, and we will look forward to the next time.